Hashem, today's daf yomi is Menachos daf Kuf Zayin, but we're going to start at Kuf Vav Amud Beis, 3 lines from the bottom. The Gemara says, let's say a person says, Harei alai mizbeach. A person says, I'm going to give a gift to the temple for the altar. So then, under those circumstances, we say that what it means is, even though if he says, that's not what I meant, but if he says, he has to bring the frankincense. Because the only thing that's completely brought on the altar that's entirely burnt is the frankincense. Let's say he says, Pirashti, I set aside something for the altar. Pirashti, I don't know what I set aside. He should bring anything from anything that is brought on the altar. He has to bring from everything that is brought on the altar. So the Gemara says, let's go over it slowly. If he says, he has to bring the frankincense. You have the sueka, is frankincense the only thing that's entirely burnt on the altar? Va'ika ola, what about an ola offering? That's entirely burnt. The Gemara says, no, it's not. Ika ola kohanim, the skin goes to the hide goes to the kohanim. Va'ika ola sa'of, what about the ola sa'of, the bird of an ola? That's entirely burnt. The Gemara says, no. Ika moravino, so there's the crop and the feathers that are thrown to the bottom of the altar. Rashi says, Nizrakin ain't so much. They're thrown next to the altar. If you need the heat, you can put it on. Yeah. Whatever you want, Chef. So the Gemara says, Rashi says about them, Nizrakin ain't so much. V'nivlayan b'mekoman. And then they get absorbed in their place there at the bottom of the altar. Kedamrina b'Mesechas Yoma. And we talk about that in Mesechas Yoma. That also we had it in Zvachim that after the Olas Ofa slaughtered, the Kohen would have to throw it to the other to the ground, and that's where it get absorbed in. Gemara says, "Vayika Nesachim." What about the Nesachim? If he says the Nesachim are entirely burnt on the altar, the Gemara says no. The Nesachim go l'shitin asli. They're not burnt on the altar. The wine is poured, and also the water, it's poured, and it goes towards the bottom of the altar. The Gemara says, Va'ika minchas nesachim. What about the minchas nesachim, which is entirely burnt? Here must be referring to the flour and the oil, which is typically accompanying a korban. The Gemara says, no, kiven de'ika mincha, the achli kohana mina. Since there is a type of, since generally speaking, the mincha is what the Kohanim do eat, lo psikole. The Gemara didn't draw such a distinction between mincha and minchas nesachim. Okay, so now the next line we're on Kuf Zayin Amud Aleph, 3 lines from the top. If a person says Harei Zahav, the person says, I'm going to give gold, will yifkos mi dinar zahav. He should give, then we say that what he means, that vow, if he says, I'm giving gold, he has to give a minimum of a gold coin. Gemara says, V'dilma naska, maybe it means, like a naska is just Rashi says one piece of gold that's called a plata. I don't know, in French it's called a plata. It's basically like a strip of gold, not a coin. Maybe that's what he meant. There's a dispute amongst the Rishonim. Is this more or less than a gold coin? But either way, how do we know it's a gold coin and not a naska? No, so the Gemara says, Rabbi Elazar says, he specifically said a coin, a gold coin. And so then we say it's a dinar. So the Gemara says, Vidoma priti, but there's another coin that's more than a matbeya. It's called a priti. So Rav Papa, no, that we assume he didn't mean. Priti de dahava lo aviinchi. People don't make prutim of gold. So therefore that can't be what he's being bound to when he says those words. Kasef, why don't we just ask him? Because the Pasha says it doesn't matter what he'll say now. The matter is what his words bound him to. Even if he says, well, that's not what I meant, doesn't matter. Kasef well yifkos mi dinar. If he says he's giving silver, he has to give a little, at least a dinar. The Dilma Naska, same question. Shamar Velazar Davar Matpeya. The Dilma Prite, same question again. Amar Sheshes Ba'asra to Hosago Prite to Kaspa. In that place, they didn't make silver prutim. They only made Uh, they only made copper one. Nechoshes, if he says nechoshes, well, yifkos mean mea kesef. He has to give at least a mea, which is a larger coin than a dinar. Tanya Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov Omer, well, yifkos mean tzinura ketana shal nechoshes. He has to give a small tzinura, which is a small fork. Rashi says mazleg katan, a small fork of copper. What would you do with such a small fork in the temple? Amar Abaye shemachatatam ba psilos and kanchem baneros. They would basically cut down the wicks with it and clean out the lamps with it, which is also this week's parasha, talks about the menorah. Nevertheless, that's the minimum amount, according to Rebbe Elazar ben Yaakov, you have to get at least a tzinora. Clearly there he didn't say a matbeya. And then the Gemara says barzel, if he says the barzel, the iron, Tanya, what happens if he says barzal? Achirim omrim, well, yivchos mikalya oreb. He has to give, if he says barzal, he has to give the amount that's needed to make a kalya oreb. What's a kalya oreb? Rashi says mismaros chadin tochvin berosh gagayechol. These were sharp spikes that they used to put on the top of the sanctuary, lechlos orvin, shelo yishvolav. To basically get rid of the birds, that they wouldn't come to sit on the roof and make it into, God forbid, dirty it with their wastes. So that's what Rashi says. Tosfos gives another explanation. Tosfos says with makom acher in another place. And interestingly enough, the Mesorah Sashah says, I don't know where this other place is. Now, it's not like AI saying, I don't know. It's not like Shmuel Herzl saying, like, this is the Mesorah Sashah. If he says he doesn't know, we don't know, but maybe other sources say where it is. But Makom Acher, Pirish, Kamin Tabla Chada, like a Zikufa Altzida, like a sharp piece of metal put on its side. It's sharp to cut like a knife. So a very sharp piece of metal. Uba Aroch, then Tosfos says in the Aroch was even earlier than Rashi and dictionary. Arach kol pirish sha'asu surah vriach ba'ofos, and he says migaga echo kederach sha'osin nachshav shomriz rayim, like something to scare away the birds. They made like a scarecrow, so to speak. The Karo is Kalya Orev. And then the Aruch says, Mikdo Shrishon Sheshchina Shruyaba. The Aruch says, in the first temple where there was the divine presence, Lo Ayu Tzrichin Kalya Orev. There they didn't need this. Shelo Ayu Ofos Parchinolav. Because the bird that was so holy, the birds wouldn't even fly there. But in the second temple, where the holiness was not as great as the first temple, that's where they needed it. That's where they needed it. Okay. Anyway, so we see all these different explanations. So of the Kalya Orev. The Kama, and how big is this? Amar Yosef Amma. This is one Amma by one Amma, and he could Amri. When you post me Amma. Amar Yosef Kalya Orev. Now to the next Mishnah, let's say a person says, and if he says, I'm going to bring wine, under those circumstances, well, Yifchos Mishlosha Lugin. He has to give a minimum of 3 Lugin under those circumstances. 3 Lugin of wine. Rashi says, because that's a minimum amount of Nisachim of wine. Shaman, if he says oil, well, yifchos mi lug. He has to give a minimum of 1 lug, because that's the minimum amount. If you use a carbon mincha, it's 1 lug. Rabbi Omer Shlosha Lugin Pirash. Rabbi Omer Shlosha Lugin. Rabbi says for the oil, you also have to give like the Nisachim 3 Lugin. Let's say he says Pirash Veini or not Pirash. He says I set it aside, but I don't remember how much. Yavi Kiyom Meruba. You bring like the day of abundance. We'll see what that is. Dan Rabbanan, the Bryce says, it says in the pasuk Ezrach. It says in pasuk by Nesachim Ezrach Melamed Shemisnad Vinyayin, and from this extra word Ezrach, we see that you could make a nadava, a voluntary gift of wine to the temple. V'kama shlosha lugin, and it's the same amount of Nesachim, so it's 3 lugin. Minayin Shimratza Osif Yosef. How do you know you can add on? Tamomer, yeah, Yachal Yefosam. I think you give less than 3 lugin. Tamomer Kacha. Shemen, let's say he said oil. Well, you of course Rabbi Omer Shlosh lugin. So there's a dispute about oil. Tanakh Kama says 1 lug. Rabbi says you have to give a minimum of 3 lugin. For my kamif, okay, what's their argument about? Amru Rabbanan Kamei Rav Papa. That the argument is about the principle of don mina. You learn something out from one source, umina, and when you learn it out from that source, you learn out everything from that source. Whereas the other opinion is the don minei v'ukim ma'asra. You learn out one thing from that place, v'ukim ma'asra, and you expand the rest of the law in that place. Meaning, just take out one law from one place, not everything. So, come in Rabbanan Savri, the rabbis who say 1 lug of oil. Don mina, they learn it out from umina, and they learn out everything. What are they learning out from? They learn out from the mincha of oil, not mincha misnadin. Just like you can donate a korban mincha, avshem and nami misnadin. Also, you can donate the oil, umina, and you learn out everything from the mincha. Ma mincha belug, just like mincha is 1 lug of oil, avshem and belug. So 2 shemen is 1 lug of oil. The Rebbe Savar don mina v'uki b'hasa. Rebbe says learn it out from that and keep it in its place. What does that mean? Ma mincha misnadvin, just like a mincha you can donate. Avshem and nami misnadvin. Also, oil you can donate. Uki ba'asra, and you leave the mincha in its place, and you say that the oil is taught from Nesachim. Kenesachim, ma Nesachim shlosha slugin. Avshem and nami shlosha slugin. Just like the Nesachim is 3 lug of oil, also the donating oil is 3 lugin. So Amar Lahu Rav Papa. So Rav Papa says back to the Rabbanan who said this law to him, if Rabbi is really learning it out from Mincha, everybody would agree. Don't mina. Everybody would say if he's really learning it out from Mincha, that the Rabbi would say it's 1 lug because don't mina, we learn out everything. The Rabbi's not learning it out from Mincha. Rabbi Mei Ezrach Kamio is learning out from the same source as wine, which is the word Ezrach. So Amarle, just like we learn like wine, it's 3. So too, we teach us oil also, and we learn out from there that it's 3 lugin. Don't be no mina. So according to Rav Papa, Rabbi also says don't be no mina. So Amarle, Rav Huna Braid, Rav Nasan, Rav Papa, Mimatis Amrashachik. Can you really say that Rabbi learns it out from Ezrach? That's his source that you could donate oil. Tanya, we learned in the Brayta, it says korban. It says in the pasuk, "V'nefesh kitakriv korban min chol Hashem." This teaches us that you donate oil. The kama shlosha slugin. How much oil do you donate? 3 lugin, and that korban is said by the mincha. Man shamas the amar shlosha slugin. Who's the one who says that you donate 3 lugin? Rebbe, the kamaisi lami korban. He learned that from the korban mincha. So Amarle, so Rav Papa says, okay, I had said it on logic, but Tanya, you have a brisa that says like you. You got the brisa, I don't. Fine. If he set aside the wine or the wine and doesn't remember what he set aside, Yavi ki yom neruba. He brings it like a great day. What is a yom neruba? So the Gemara says, the Brayta says, Tana ki yom devarishon shalchag shachal yos b'Shabbos. What's the day where you bring the most communal offerings in the Beis Hamikdash? That's the first day of Sukkot that will come out on Shabbos, because that's the day that you bring the most number of korbanos. You bring 13 bulls, 2 rams, 14 sheep as an olah, 1 goat as a chatas, and then 2 kavas, 2 sheep for musaf of Shabbos, and then 2 sheep for the Karban Talmud. And each one of all these korbanos, if you add them up, is 140 lug of wine and 140 lug of oil. So therefore, you got a lot of wine being spilled on the altar that day and a lot of oil. So that's the Yom Merubah. Says the Mishnah at the bottom, if a person says, I'm going to bring an olah, what is he obligating himself to? Yavi keves. He has to bring a keves, which she says is the least of the olos. And an olah, just to remind us all, is always a male. So he has to bring a keves only. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah Omer Otoro ben Yonah. He could bring not a keves, but either a sheep. I mean, a bird, a Toro ben Yonah. The two types of birds. Pirashti min abakar. He says I separated from the cattle. So the Einio Dea Ma Pirash. He said I took an oa and I separated for something from the ben bakar, from the cattle. So then it has to be either. So then he has to either bring many of them apirashti. I don't remember what I separated. Yavi par ve'ego menabehima. Then he can bring. Let's bring something from the cattle, which is male, and it's either a par, a bull, or an ego, a calf. So we have. Let's just remind ourselves: what are the animals that are kosher to be brought as a korban? It's either a par, which is a masculine bull, or female is a para, which is the calf, or the baby one, which is the egel, or it could be a sheep or a goat, a keves or a seir in its, or an ayo. These are different forms of different ages of the sheep and the goat, or it could be a bird. So if he says I'm bringing an ola and I separate it from the cattle, I don't remember what, then he has to bring either the bull or the calf. Let's say he says, Mina Behima, I separated from the animals, meaning not just from the cattle, but from all the animals. I don't know which one I did. Yavi, then he has to bring all of them. Parva Ego, the bull, which is usually 1 to 3 years old. Older than that is usually called a shore. The Ego, Io the ear, a ram or a goat, these are the old ones, or Gativa Toa, or the kids of the goat and the sheep. Pirashi pirashi. Let's say I separated it and I don't remember what I separated. So then most if and Toro ben Yonah. Then in addition, we say maybe he also separated the male birds to bring them. The Toro ben Yonah, the birds. So the Gemara says, let's say he says, Hareo I todo shlamim. Once he says I'm going to bring a korban toda, which is a type of shlamim or a shlamim. There it could be from male or female. So Yavi Keves, he brings the cheapest one, which is the sheep. Pirashti min abakar ve'eni odema pirash. He said I separate from the cattle. Well, here it could be a male or female. So Yavi parva para, a bull or a cow. Ego ve'egla, the female or male calf. Mina behema. But he said I separated from the animals. Ve'eni odema pirashti. Well, then Yavi para, ego egla. Ayol v'rachela, sire, sira, gediva, gedia, talatli. I brings all the different combinations, male and females with the different ages. Let's say he says, Hareo sure. Let's say he says, I'm going to bring a bull. Yavi hu unisachav. Then what he has to do, if he says, I'm going to bring a shore, Yavi hu unisachav b'money. Then he has to bring the ox with its nisachav, with its libations, and it comes to the equivalent of a mana. How do we know that the equivalent of a mana? Rashi says this is kachnas parashtino b'torah shabbat peh. That's just the oral law. That was the tradition. Let's he says an egel yavihu nesachav b'chamish. Then he has to bring it and its calf, the calf and its nesachav that are valued at a total of 5 selah. Ayol yavihu nesachav b'shtayim. Ram, it's 2 selah. Keves yavihu nesachav for the sheep. It and its nisachav for 1 selah. Sure, b'mana. Let's he says I'm going to bring an ox that's worth a mana. Yavi b'mana chutz min nisachav. Then he has to bring the ox that's worth 100 plus the nisachav. Ego b'chemesh yavi b'chemesh chutz min nisachav. Same thing by the calf. 5 plus the nisachav. Ayal b'shtayim yavi b'shtayim chutz min nisachav. Same idea. Then keves b'sel yavi b'sel chutz min nisachav. So, okay, next case, shor b'mana. Let's say he says I'm going to bring an ox that's worth a mana. Vehevi shnayim b'mana, and he brought 2 oxen that together equal a mana. Well, so he has not fulfilled his obligation. Mafilu zeb mana chaser dinar, v'zeb mana chaser dinar. Even if each one is worth just slightly less than a mana, and together it's obviously worth way more, still not going to have fulfilled his obligation because he says I'm bringing a shor b'mana, and he didn't do that. He says shachar. He says I'm going to bring a black ox. Maybe lavan, he brought a white, or lavan maybe shachar, white, and he brought black. So with God over he said I'm gonna bring a big one, he brought a small one. Well, yatsa. He has not fulfilled his obligation. Why not? What's the difference between a black and a white? So either you could say that's just not exactly what he vowed. But I was also thinking that maybe I mean, this could be completely far off, but maybe in that area, there was a material difference. So let's say the black ones were bred differently. All the black ones were kept together and they were bred to be, let's say, faster. And the white ones, I mean, it could be like now you just see a black one or a white one, you say, okay, there's no difference, but maybe those days it was bred differently. Anyway, that's just what I was thinking. He said a big one, he brought a small one, didn't fulfill his obligation. Let's say he said, I'm bringing a small ox, Katan Vevi Gadol, and then he brought a big one. Yatzai fulfilled his obligation because he gave more. Said, I'm going to give $100 and he gave 200. Of course, it's okay. But Rabbi Omer Lo Yatzai. Excuse me, Rabbi says he has not fulfilled his obligation. We touched on this dispute yesterday because Rabbi says it has to be exact. And so this was not exact. He had to give exactly what he vowed. So the Gemara says, Vilo Puigi and the Tanakama and Rabbi Eliezer, remember Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah says, if he says he has to bring a bird. He's obligating himself to a bird. But Tanakama says a sheep. But they're not arguing. Marki Asri. Depends on the place. Which one was cheaper? In one place, the birds were cheaper than the sheep, ironically. He says, I'm going to bring an olah that's worth a selah on the altar. Yavi kevas. He'll have to bring a sheep, says the Bride. The only thing that's brought for a selah is the sheep. Let's say pirashti pirashi. I set aside something for an olah, but I don't remember what it was. Yavi mikol davar shekarav b'selah. So let's say he said, I set aside something for a selah. I set aside a selah, but I don't remember which animal. You should bring anything that can be brought as a selah on the altar of Davin's Bech. Let's say he says pirashti min abakar. Let's say he says I separated from the cattle. Ve'ini odeh ma pirashti, and I don't remember what I separated. Yavi parvegel. So he has to bring a bull or a calf. Why should he have to bring both? Why does he have to bring a bull and a calf under those circumstances? He separated one. Then for sure, if he brought the bull, it would encompass within it the calf. So Amai says the Gemara, let him just bring the bull, and then I'll include the calf. The Gemara says, no, Hamani, who is this? This is the position of Rebbe. The Amar, like we said at the end of the Mishnah, Katan, if he says he's going to bring a small one, he hasn't fulfilled his obligation if he brought a large one. So here too, we'll say he meant to bring, if he vowed to bring calf and he brought a bull, he hasn't fulfilled his obligation, so we make him bring both a bull and a calf if he set aside one. Gemara says, Rabbi, can't be Rabbi, Ema Seifa, because what does the next clause say? Sure, b'mana. If he says he's going to give an ox for mana, ve'evi shnayim b'mana lo yotza. And if he brought 2 for 1 mana, it's not. He hasn't fulfilled his obligation. V'afilu zeh b'mana chaser dina, v'zeh b'mana chaser dina. Shachar ve'evi luavan, lav ve'evi shachar, gadol ve'evi katan lo yotza. Katan ve'evi gadol yotza. Rabbi Omer lo yotza. But we say the next clause is the Tanakama says that if you said I'm going to bring a small one, he brought a big one, you have fulfilled your obligation. Whereas Rebbe says you haven't. And so do you want to say that the first clause is Rebbe, then the Rabbanan, and back to Rebbe? That doesn't make sense. So you want to say Reisha v'Seifa Rebbe, U'Mitziyas Rabbanan. You want to say the first clause is Rebbe, the middle one is the Rabbanan, and the concluding clause is Rebbe. And Mar says, yeah, that's what we have to say. In Reisha v'Seifa Rebbe, U'Mitziyas Rabbanan. That's what it is. The first and last clause are Rebbe, and the middle ones are Rabbanan. This is how we're going to say. This is how you read it. First, we mentioned that if you set aside from the cattle, but you forgot what it was, you have to bring both a bull and a calf. And this thing, this exact point is a dispute with Rebbe and the Rabbanan. That Rebbe says it's not okay just to bring the smaller one. You also have to bring. Not okay just to bring the bigger one. You also have to bring the smaller one, so it's exact. We're going to keep going here, but I'll stop this is really today's daf, and now we're going to